Hi, this is Brandy Schantz. You're listening to Living Chronic, and it's the first time you've been listening to Living Chronic in some time. I did end season 2 quickly. I did not plan to do that, but I did need to take some time to myself and focus on what needed to be done in an immediate manner. It's been a difficult year. I finally got the diagnosis that I needed. As many of you know, I had a very severe reaction to my Humira. I was diagnosed with drug-induced lupus finally after 19 months of enduring that reaction. I was told that I had an unknown neurologic condition, but nobody really went further. I was told to just give it some time, 6 months to a year, get the medication out of my system. I'll be back to normal. I'll be fine. But of course, I wasn't back to normal. I wasn't fine. I have not been okay for a long time. I have struggled. I've been dealing with various health issues. And I've been told multiple times when I go in to see the doctor that it's just in my head. I need therapy. Well, it turns out it's not in my head at all. This year started pretty difficult. I had severe migraines for the first time. I had my very first one 3 weeks after my sinus surgery in November last year. And it only got worse from there. I had a migraine that lasted over a month, sent me to the ER. I had aura with my migraine. I was nauseous. I could barely stand up. It was so painful. And I'd never had one before prior to my sinus surgery. And I couldn't figure out why I was having these migraines. In addition to that, everything really went downhill. The wheels came off. And everything I had been experiencing before got worse. I was still unable to run. My chest pain was worse. I was experiencing vertigo and dizziness. I was fainting upon standing. I was experiencing, every possible weird side effect you can imagine. Couldn't completely empty my bladder. I'd have to go to the bathroom 3 or 4 times before leaving the house. I was having GI issues I'd never had before. I was having some difficulty swallowing. I, suddenly had some painful, GI issues I'd never had before. And as a Crohn's patient, I thought I had everything. They even rushed me in for an urgent colonoscopy endoscopy. And for the first time ever, the doctor said, "Oh, your Crohn's is doing well. Are you sure about that, doc?" So it was a whole new world. I have all these issues. Nobody could really tell me what was going on. Swollen lymph nodes every day. Not sick, as in cold, but I still had swollen lymph nodes. Why? But the migraine, of course, was my most immediate concern because anybody who has migraines knows it's painful. It's painful. And just trying to deal with that on a daily basis it felt almost impossible. It felt insurmountable. Like I could not, overcome this particular problem. I also really gave up. I was exhausted. Sometimes you need a break, and it's hard to take a break when you're chronically ill. Nobody else is there to save you but you. I wish that insurance companies would provide us with advocates. That would be greatly helpful. But it's just us out there. We're doing the best we can, and we're getting out there, and we're pushing, and we're learning. I've read through more medical journal articles than I have ever wanted to read through as a non-scientist. But we do it. But this year, I was exhausted. I couldn't do it. So my husband took over, and he found me a neurologist to take a look at my migraines. And what happened was I went in to see this neurologist, and he had already, read my file and saw that I had many, many health issues. That, it wasn't just a migraine, the wheels were falling off. It was bladder, it was GI, it was, my heart, my chest, the chest pains. And he said, "You know what? I think all of this is related, and I don't think it's in your head." And he ordered tests that no other doctor had ordered prior to this point. And sure enough, it wasn't in my head at all. I've been diagnosed with autonomic dysfunction. Yes, I had to go back and look at what my autonomic nervous system did because I just forgot, I guess. We don't think about our autonomic nervous system that often. I also, as a part of that dysfunction, have cardiac autonomic neuropathy, which explains why I can't run quite well. I was also diagnosed with small fiber neuropathy, which explains why my legs are so heavy and have had so much tingling and burning pain that's increased over the years, as well as in my arms. I just complained about my legs more because you know what? You always have to use your legs, can't get anywhere without them. I was also diagnosed with pseudomotor dysfunction. I was diagnosed with orthostatic hypotension and sleep apnea, just for good measure. So it's been difficult. I have a lot of new things to learn in life. I will live with this. I just needed time to really take a step back from what I was doing here with living chronic and look into my own life and envision what was going to be next for me, what my life would look like living with these, because there is no cure. Now, am I still going to try to make it better? Of course I am. You know me. I'm already starting to do some very, very slow zone 2 runs, seeing if I can't train my heart into working a little bit better. But the fact is, my life's different. I needed some time to take a look at what my life looks like. But I'm coming back and I'm getting back into recording and I have more focus. Every season, I get a little bit more focus, and that's what's been so great about this. It started as a podcast, an outlet, a means for me to let out my emotions of what I was feeling as I dealt with these terrible pains and issues that nobody could really explain to me, trying to get over this life-altering drug reaction. Not even get over it, just get through it. It's been difficult on me emotionally. It's been difficult on me mentally. And, I needed to find an outlet for that. I found that there were a lot of people out there like me, and I tried to put more of a focus in season 2 on veterans, especially. How do we advocate for ourselves? What do we need to be doing to ensure that we're getting the right treatment, especially if we've been exposed to toxins? Incidentally, I've also learned that a lot of what I'm experiencing could have been kicked off by the toxins, and just the reaction to the Humira really, sent it into overdrive. And now this is where I'm at. We always have a lot of questions. We can't expect to have every answer. This is just what it is. This is our lives. Sometimes you have to really search hard to get all the answers. Sometimes you have to make assumptions and do the best you can. But this next season, I really want to put a lot of focus in on the medical community and how we can make it better. My life has changed a lot over the last 4 years. It's changed a lot after 10 years when I was diagnosed with the Crohn's disease. So, I've learned a lot. I've also been able to apply a lot of what I've already known to my current situation. People ask me all the time, how were you able to advocate for yourself? Well, no, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor. The closest thing I came to studying science was my exercise science classes and me liking to keep a little, personal training license on the side. But I know how to research. And that's something you learn in any graduate degree. Undergraduate as well. It just gets a little bit better with graduate. Either way, I know how to do some research. I know how to do analysis. And that helped me quite a bit because I drove my diagnosis by bringing in journal articles, peer-reviewed journal articles, current studies being done, and said, let's take a look at this. That's how I finally got to where I am today, 4 years in. I also got here by looking at the structure of whether it be, the hospital I was going to or a certain medical office. And I know business structure. I've been a leader. I've worked in business for years. Even in the Army, there's a structure. I know how to find what does what. What's the mechanism that makes this happen? And I was able to get in there and find the ways to get to where I needed to be. It wasn't easy, but I did it. I've also joined the board of the Crohn's Colitis Foundation. I have learned so much in that role. In addition, I've now been a political appointee for some time in the state of Virginia on the Rehabilitation Council. I'm learning, I'm still applying a lot of things I've known for years. And I think that's what's important to focus on. The medical community, maybe you've never done anything in science in your life. Maybe you have no affiliation with anything medical, science related, whatever it might be. Maybe you've never been a disability advocate before in your life, but you know what? I'm disabled. Maybe you're disabled as well. So I have my personal experiences, and I have my experiences in business and my experience in business development and sales that's really lent itself to all of these things. I found out that I was really great at fundraising. Well, I've been in business development and sales for years. It applies just because it wasn't in specifically fundraising for Crohn's colitis or, for women's programs. When I was sitting on the board of the Women in Housing and Finance Foundation, I was able to do a lot of great fundraising. It's the same. And one of the things that struck me the most recently is this medical industry is so similar to the Army during the global war on terrorism. I know it's been quite a few years, but we weren't doing too well. And one of the things that was identified is there were too many silos. Nobody was talking to anybody else. There was groupthink. You had the commander who said, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to think, and everybody fell in line. So there was no conflict of thought, no diversity of thought. Nobody stand up and say, sir, ma'am, I don't think that's going to work, and here's why. We also had nobody looking at problems from a different point of view. So there was a lot of change that was made in the Army. One of those things was introducing red teaming. I used to run a red team. We took a look at problem sets from a completely different point of view. We did not work for the commander. So there was no influence over our jobs, our evaluations, nothing like that. And you know what? Between that and examining the Army as a whole, there was a lot of work done to get rid of toxic leadership in the Army. And it was successful. Because you know what? You're never going to do well as an organization if you're working within silos, you're not communicating, and there's no diversity of thought. And one of the things that struck me as quite interesting in the medical community is there's no diversity of thought and there's silos everywhere. I bring in new studies going on or journal articles that have been written over the past 10 years on a subject, and my doctors look at me like, wow, where did you find this? Well, it wasn't too hard to find because I didn't have to have a subscription to any kind of particular research service for medicine or anything. I used Google. I just made sure to go in and use the proper tools. I knew to look for peer-reviewed articles. I knew to look for studies and pulling out those studies being done by reputable institutions like Mayo Clinic, like Veterans Affairs in DC. And that's how I found it. So they shouldn't have been surprised. And I often wonder, why don't you have anybody, you don't have to have a doctor doing this. That's one of the biggest problems, right? How do we get more doctors? Well, that's not an easy fix. You either try to bring more people in through immigration, which I strongly support, or you get more people into medical school, which is a very long process. They need to go through undergraduate, graduate, they need to hit their residency. This isn't a quick fix. Well, you know what is a quick fix? There are plenty of people with bachelor's degrees in biology or if I could figure it out, just find a really great research guy who can say, hey, you know what, there's a lot of new stuff emerging here. Let's take a look at that. What surprised me about my diagnosis is this is actually on the rise in people with long COVID. When a trend like that is emerging, everybody in the industry should know about it. That fact is just astounding to me that they don't seem to know what's going on in trending long COVID issues. In the Army, if I had ignored trending issues in terrorist attacks or maybe how money was getting moved from one place to another because it wasn't particularly in my country and my area of responsibility, I would have been fired. You have to know what's going on everywhere around you. You have to be able to identify trends. So I'm really shocked that the medical community has not figured that out yet. Or at least from anything I've seen going to various doctors and hospitals here in the DC metro area. They have no clue. And I know they can do it because when I went to see the urologist about my bladder issues, the first question I was asked was, are you on Ozempic? Because many people are having side effects from Ozempic that lead them to urology. So somebody knows how to identify a trend. So I'm really shocked that that's not going on right now. The other thing that surprises me is we haven't found anybody to be a good liaison to really work through and make sure we're connecting dots. If people are going in to see cardiologists, let's say, because their heart suddenly isn't working properly, we need people who are talking with them and the neurologist so that everybody's connecting and understanding what these problems are and how they connect. And then, of course, lastly, if you go to any of the job boards and you look for jobs, particularly in the administration, management of hospitals, management of medical groups, they always want somebody with 15 plus years in the medical community. And I wonder, why wouldn't anybody who's been successful at running a business be qualified for this? Because I think what's happening is exactly what we saw happening in the Army, exactly why we decided to dig deep and find ways to make things better. Everybody's been taught the exact same way. They've been told this is the way to do things. This is how it's done. With so many issues within our medical community, why aren't we reaching out and asking somebody to come in who's ran something successful outside of medicine? Are there learning curves? Right, there's a learning curve everywhere. But look at me. I have zero medical background, and I have driven every bit of my own care and my own diagnosis. Every bit of this has been driven by me. Every bit. So I have to wonder, why is the medical community not reaching out to get diversity of thought? It's interesting how I've learned how much of my own background has applied to my situation, how I look at things, and how I would solve things if I were in that position. And I hope everybody thinks about that. I hope everybody thinks about me when they're feeling intimidated by this big medical community and all these doctors who have more experience in medicine or more education or, have a certain expertise, whatever it might be. Don't be intimidated. Don't be intimidated. Think about me. Be that pushy broad. Oh, it's in my head? No, I don't think it is. Let me go back and find somebody else. Don't take no for an answer. It's been 4 years for me to get a diagnosis. It wasn't in my head at all. Don't let them tell you that. Don't let them intimidate you. Okay, you've never run a hospital before. What have you done that applies? Do not let them intimidate you. And that's a lot of what I want to focus on for this next season of Living Chronic. I want to see change. I want us to think differently about what it means to suddenly become sick. I want people to think differently around what can I do now that I have this illness. I've said it a million times. I'm fine. I'm different. That's all. I'm still running through life. Once again, for second time now, I've encountered a terrible health problem. And once again, I had a doctor suggest going on SSDI. There's no reason. I still work fine. There's nothing that stopped me. Do I feel great? No. Can I always leave the house? No. That's what hybrid work is for right now, right? I want us to think differently. Don't just keep putting sick people and disabled people in a corner, and don't let anybody intimidate you. And let's work together. Let's think about how we can make this medical community better, because I know we can. I know we can. The silos, the groupthink, the lack of diversity of thought, all of these things can be done far better, because you know what? We deserve it as patients. I've fought like hell. I'm exhausted. But I got here. And I know you can too. But I also know that there's room for improvement. There's always room for improvement. The very first piece of advice I got when I started my job in the Army, I was told, whenever you take on your next position, always go in with the intent to make that position better than it was when you left. We can make the medical system better. We don't deserve this much pain. We don't deserve to have to, make our health a full-time job. We don't deserve to be told no so many times or spoken down to. We don't deserve having to do all of our own work. My goodness, I hate reading medical journal articles. It was bad enough reading case studies for business school. Now you want me to read these dry things? Hey, you know what? I'm doing what I need to, but I know we can make it better. And I hope that this particular season we can really dive into how can we make this world a better world for those of us who are living chronic. Thank you for joining me. Looking forward to seeing you in season 3.